All right, hi everyone. This is Karen Whitaker with the League of American Bicyclists. Thanks for joining me today for this Lobbying 101 presentation in preparation of the National Bike Summit. So, yeah, this year's theme is slow roads. We're really excited about it. We're going to a new place. It's the MLK Library in downtown Washington, D.C. It's a really cool building. And this year we'll have a nice auditorium for those of you who were here last year. So we'll have a chance to all be together. A couple of notes on this. Please keep yourself muted until the end when we get to Q&A. And please use the chat button if you have any questions. We'll have plenty of time Q&A at the end. So one difference this year is that all of our Hill meetings are going to be in person. We're going old school for the folks who've been there before. And I look forward to hearing what you all think of this and how you, versus in the past when we had some virtual meetings and some in person. Quick outline for today. I'm going to talk a little bit about why we lobby. I'm going to talk through the structure of the meeting, what your Hill meeting will look like, a little bit about how to prepare for it, and then how to follow up after the summit. So, but first of all, I just want to say thank you. We at the League really appreciate everyone participating in the summit and coming to the summit. I think one of the best parts about the summit is just being together and being able to share stories with people who also care about bicycling. Maybe someone's trying to do a campaign that you've done, or you're trying to do something and you can share ideas and best practices and just have fun. We got a great agenda this year. It's all on the Whova app. So go ahead, get in there. There's discussion groups you can join. Really looking forward to it. And I personally want to thank you for signing up to come out and lobby. You really help make my job better or easier. For those who don't know me, I'm the Deputy Executive Director, but I also lead the federal policy work and the lobbying on Capitol Hill. And what we know and what we've seen through the research is the number one thing that can change a member's mind or move a member of Congress from someone on an issue they don't know about. The thing that moves them the most is an in-person meeting with constituents. So you really are the most effective lever to moving a politician. And we know it works. Last year, we got over 40 co-sponsors on the two bills we were asking for, and which was the Langenkamp Safety Act and the E-Bike Act. And the third ask, if you remember, was about truck side guards and asking NHTSA, asking USDOT to test the safety between trucks and bikes by putting a physical barrier between the truck wheels. That language, we were successful into getting into the Senate budget report language. And Congress hasn't completely passed a budget yet, so we don't know yet, but hopefully by next week, we'll know whether or not we got that into the bill. So we might have something to celebrate before you even start lobbying. Oops. Yeah, and the other thing I just want to say is that, you know, the bike movement, we punch above our weight when it comes to Hill work and legislation. And that's not because of the people in DC. That's because of all of you. You've shown members of Congress that you will show up, that you care, and that you get involved. And that has really helped. For me, I think my main goal for the summit is really that you all get to build a relationship with your member of Congress and their staff person. We want them to come out of this Hill meeting, one, knowing that there's people in their district that care about biking, that want to see safe, accessible biking. The second thing we want is for them to come out knowing what our asks are, what the bills are that we're asking them to co-sponsor, And then the third piece is that they now have someone in their district to contact and to reach out when something else happens, when they hear about another bill or they have a question about bicycling. Because we want you and your state and local groups to be their experts on this. So the strategy behind this is really that being prepared and being organized is really key. We want them to leave the meeting knowing what we want. But part of my goal is also that this be a fact-finding mission, that you learn from them what they're thinking about bicycling. Have they biked in their district? Were they receptive to what we were saying? Did they have concerns? Anything like that is super helpful. There's 540 offices, 538 offices on Capitol Hill, and there's only one of me. So I really rely on the reports I get back from these meetings to know who I should target and hear from you like, oh, I think my member will be really good on this issue. Or I didn't quite sell them, but they seemed interested in this bill. Can you follow up? All of that information is super helpful to me. So yeah, I got ahead of myself. So the objectives, right, for them is to understand the role of bicycling in their community, know what we're asking, know who to contact, and then the last one, know who to contact in their district if they have a question about bicycling. And then the last one is to expect you to follow up. If in your meeting you say, if they ask you a question you don't know the answer to, and you say, oh, you know what, I'm going to find out that answer and get back to you, that's super helpful. If you ask them to co-sponsor a piece of legislation and they're mostly going to have to say, hey, look, I need to look over this bill. Why don't you reach out in a week? Please make sure you say, yes, absolutely. I will reach out to you in a week. Because if you say that, they're more likely to actually learn about the bill and think about it and check in with the member of Congress. So those are our objectives. I want to talk a little bit about the timeline of where we are. Right now, every state has a state coordinator, and those coordinators are setting the Hill meetings for you. So you don't have to worry about that, but that's what's happening right now. As we get closer to the summit, maybe next week, you should hear from your state coordinator. They will try to set up a prep meeting to get everyone from your delegation just on a quick Zoom meeting. So you meet each other, they can start to prep you for the summit. When we actually get to the summit on March 19th, we'll talk about the asks, and then you'll have a chance to sit down with your whole state delegation, all of you who are going to the meetings, and talk through who's going to do what, ask any questions, answer any questions, and just help prepare. So if you've never done this before, don't worry, there's a lot of prep. March 20th, we'll have our Hill Day, and then after that, we'll talk about follow-up. So a little bit about prepping for the summit. One thing I really suggest ask everyone to do is just take about 15 minutes to find out who's your member of Congress, who are your senators. See if there's anything in their bio or background that relates to bicycling or health or livable communities or something else you may have in common with them. We'll ask you to look up to see if they have co-sponsored or put their name on any of the bills that we care about. There's a couple of places, if you don't know who your representative is, in the upper right-hand corner, if you just type into Google, find your representative, it'll give you the zip code. You can click that and you can find it. It's also on our website. You can look at their website, and then in the red box at the bottom, it's usually last name at house.gov or last name at Senate. So I grew up in Massachusetts. So my senator would be Elizabeth Warren. So I could type in warren.senate.gov and get her website. A couple other things to do, as you're looking on the web. Yeah, check out their website and campaign sites. look at the local news, see if they've been in the news recently, and there's anything that you can learn about that. Are there any bills that are related? And you try to think about their priorities, because we can connect bicycling to economics, to health, we talked about transportation, livable communities, quality of life, all of those things. And one thing you can do on your own is think about how you want to introduce yourself in that meeting. You obviously want to say your name, any organization that you're part of, and then maybe one sentence on why bicycling matters to you. And so you want to be able to do that in, about 30 seconds. So I could say, my name is Karen Whitaker. I live in Washington, D.C., and I don't have a car. So it's really important to me that it's safe for me to bike to places I need to go, whether that's work or shopping or just to see friends. We also want you to do a little bit of research. I've been using the word co-sponsor a lot. That's going to be one of our asks. To co-sponsor a bill means just to sign their name on the list and say, you know what, I support this bill. It's just a sign of support. But in some ways, it can be harder even than a vote, because once they've put their name on that bill, it's there for the next, for the rest of the Congress. It's going to sit out there for a while. So sometimes it's even harder than a vote, but it's the best thing we have to ask them to do, because it's a pledge of commitment. And so we're going to be asking on a couple of bills at the summit, but there's a lot of bills that we support both this year and in the last year. Up on the web, we do have a legislation tracker. So if you go to bikeleague.org and then search for legislation tracker, this will come up. And you can see some of the bills that we're supporting. Most of them have a fact sheet linked to them. We also are setting up on our website a place where you can see the co-sponsors. Not all the bills are in there right now, but they should be in by Thursday. And to find that, you want to go up here to bikeleague.org, go to this take action right here, and then find the action center. Within that, you're going to look over to where it says scorecard on the right side. So, so you see scorecard. If you go in there, and this is where you can find your legislators, or if you know their name, you can just put it in there. So I put in the zip code for my childhood home in Massachusetts. In my case, I had to put in my specific address. That happens sometimes. And then it spit out who my 2 senators are and my member of Congress. I then clicked on Senator Ed Markey, and it shows that he is a original co-sponsor, which means he was the first person or one of the first people to support it. He wrote the bill for the Complete Streets Act of 2024. It also shows last year's Congress, and he was the original sponsor of that too. So that means I know he's an ally, especially around complete streets. And it also means I have something to say thank you for when we get into the meeting. The other thing you can do, if you scroll down, it would show the list of all the members of Congress and and I know this site, it's a little bit harder to use because our website isn't wide enough to show it. But if you click on that co-sponsor right there, you'll get a list of everyone in Congress. So let's say you're like, I wonder who else has sponsored the Complete Streets Act. And this is the House version. It shows everyone who has no position. It will show the co-sponsors and then some of the original co-sponsors. So we'll have this populated by the end of the day, Thursday, for you to look up. And we'll also send you a little bit more on the bills we'll be working on at the summit. There's a couple other things you can do for prep, and that goes back to your state coordinator. So each state has a state coordinator. They're setting up the meetings for you. They will also set up a Zoom meeting before the summit. And then there's the state meeting at the summit. So those are all plenty of time for you all to talk together and coordinate your meetings. So now let's talk about the Hill meeting. So we're not having virtual meetings this time, but the flow of the meeting is the same. You're going to do welcomes and introductions. If you have a really big group, really keep your introductions short because we don't want to, most meetings are going to be 30 minutes. We don't want to spend 15 minutes just on introductions. But you're going to say welcome, introductions. Appreciation means we're going to say thank you for something. So for Senator Markey, we can say thank you for introducing the Complete Streets Act. Then I want you to take a couple minutes to talk about bicycling in your district. What's new that's happening in your community? What are you worried about? What do you care about? What are you excited about? When you're in that state meeting, we want everyone in your group to come up with like, what's the one thing we're going to say and who's going to say it? Then we're going to talk through making the ask, a little bit of the discussion, the wrap up of the meeting, and the debrief. And I'll go into each of these in a little more detail. So again, in-person meetings, the offices were closed over COVID and a little bit after that, but now they're all open to the public. All of the cafeterias are open, all the restaurants are open. So the good news is you can just go directly to your meeting. You don't need an escort. But I do suggest you all try to meet up there 5 or 10 minutes before and again say, okay, so I'm going to lead the meeting, but I'm going to ask Marley to say thank you for the co-sponsorship. And I'm going to ask Jim to start on the Complete Streets Act. And, you know, just so that you are all on the same page. You know, I've been lobbying for 20 years. If I'm doing a lobby visit with someone else, we still do this ritual before we go into an office, just to make sure we're all on the same page. Introductions. One of the things that the state coordinator will do, or who's ever, you might have a different meeting lead in every meeting. I always suggest saying, hey, thank you so much for taking the time. I have this on my calendar for 30 minutes. Is that the same as you? And that way you make sure that either the staffer or the member of Congress knows what you're expecting. Sometimes members of Congress will come in for the first 10 minutes and then leave. It's good to know that at the beginning so you don't spend all your time on small talk. Sometimes I'll even give an overview and say something like, okay, so I have this meeting for 30 minutes. Is that the same as you? Great. What we'd like to do is do an introduction, talk a little bit about biking in our district, and then 2 asks to make of you, one on Complete Streets, one on the Langenkamp Safety Act. And then you go into that short introduction. The saying thank you for something they've done. Again, that's a great place to look at the co-sponsors. Have they co-sponsored anything that's important to us? If not that, maybe they've helped something in your district. This is a picture of Senator Bozeman from Arkansas. He doesn't co-sponsor a lot of our bills, but he did help get the Big Dam Bridge built in Little Rock, which is a bike trail over the river. So that's something that they can thank him for. Then we talk about introducing bicycling in your community. If you have anything that came out of this most recent infrastructure law, the bipartisan infrastructure law, otherwise known as IIJA, you can say that. That's great. If you can't, that's okay. Even if it's maybe it's something that the member of Congress wasn't even involved in, like maybe you did a cyclovia or an open streets event, and you just want to say like, hey, I don't know if you know about this, but last week we had this great cyclovia and all these people came out, and it just showed how much bicycling can bring people together and create a place for physical activity. The member, try to relate it to their priorities. We've always said health is an easy one. If there's been a crash in your district, you can talk about that. Most members really care about that. If it's about economy, then, if you can't find anything, every member of Congress cares about the economic wellness of their community. So if you can think about if there's been a thriving local business, if you can talk about how bicycling, people who bike to a downtown area end up spending more money than people who drive, anything like that, that can help. Also, we really want these meetings to feel like a conversation. So, ask them questions, especially if you're talking to a congressional staff, like, hey, have you been to the district? Have you ever been on do you bike? Are you interested in biking? If you don't bike, why not? And if they say safety, then you have a great hook in. Maybe they're a runner, then you can talk about physical activity and that link. Something like that. Again, you only want it to be a couple of minutes, and then you want to segue into our ask and discussion of that ask. So introducing the ask, you can say, so we're here to talk with you about the Complete Streets Act. Ask about that. Ask any open-ended questions, like, have you ever been riding your bike and felt unsafe somewhere? What was that experience? Something like that. So now that we've explained the bill, what about this do you think would help in our community? Something like that. And really try to listen, even if they're saying something you don't want to hear, like, oh, this doesn't matter in our community, that's not important. Really try to hear that. And like I said, it's okay if you get stumped, and you can even say, so you don't think this matters in our community? Why do you say that? Even something as simple as that can help. The more you learn and the more you put into your lobby report, the better it is for us to be able to do our job here in Washington. And then make the ask. So the ask would be, will the senator co-sponsor the Complete Streets Act? Will the member of Congress sponsor the Complete Streets Act? Or if you're actually talking to the senator member, would you support this? Would you co-sponsor? And it's really important to make that ask. Sometimes people get in and they're having a great discussion and they have a great meeting, but they forget to actually make the ask. And if you're talking to a staffer, they leave that meeting, they don't have to do anything, right? You want to make that ask. And 99% of the time, they're going to say to you, well, I really need to look at this bill first, or let me look this over and talk to the member. Let me talk to my boss. That's a completely reasonable thing for them to say. But the most important thing for you to do then is say, great, when do you think you'll have a time to do that? Can I contact you next Friday to find out what the member thinks about this bill, or if the member's willing to co-sponsor? I was talking to a friend of mine who is a staffer, and he said that over 90% of people that do these meetings never follow up. So if he's asked to co-sponsor a bill that he doesn't think his boss will like, he doesn't even take it to the boss until the advocates follow up. Because 90% of the time, he doesn't even have to ask his member of Congress. He doesn't even have to ask his boss. And then if they follow up, then he takes it to the member of Congress. And he said, there's only, if only 10% follow up the first time, only 10% of that group follows up a second time. And that way, he never has to say no to a constituent, or he only has to say no to 1% of the people that bother to come, right? So that's why that follow-up is super important. one of the key things I just really want to stress is to show respect for the member, their staff, and each other. So not everyone's going to agree with us. Their job, though, just so you know, the job of staff is for you to leave feeling good about that meeting. But so it should be easy, even if they say things you don't agree with, being able to say, okay, so I heard you say this. Respectfully, I disagree, but thank you for letting me know. One thing about respecting each other is I'm going to ask that you stick to the league asks for this. Because what has happened in the past is somebody in the group brings up another issue that the group hasn't agreed on, or maybe the group doesn't agree on, and then that can cause problems. People complain to us that the meeting wasn't what they were told it was, or people disagree in the meeting, right? And then it's hard for the congressional office to know what to do. So just out of respect, please stick to these asks. The thing that brings us together is biking. And yeah, something else you care about may be really important to you, but it might not be important to somebody else. If for some reason there is something else you're going to bring up in the bill, make sure everybody agrees to it before you go into the room. I want to talk through a couple of scenarios that we've seen happen. One that I mentioned is that elected officials may leave early, but the staff is likely to be there for the whole meeting. So sometimes elected officials want to come in, they want to say hello, they want to tell you how much they care about biking and walking, and they want to take a picture. That's fine. That's fine. You won't always get to make the ask about biking with the member of Congress, but you do want them, to know why you're there. And if you're associated with any local group, it's really helpful to try to do the introductions in front of the senator, and then make sure you follow up with the staffer. So in this picture, that's Senator Merkley from Oregon. His staff, Liz, here with the blonde hair, is there. So this is that scenario. She started the meeting. She's talked to everyone. Merkley comes in. If you've got 5 minutes, say thank you for whatever the thank you is. And then say, we're a group of bicyclists that represent, and either talk about the towns or the local organizations. We talked about the fact that sometimes people go and have a great meeting and then they leave, but they forgot to bring up the bill or the ask. Try to make sure that happens. Also, sometimes if the conversation is going off on a different way, we ask the state coordinators to redirect that conversation. And we ask the state coordinators to make the segues from the section to section of the meeting. So you might hear a state coordinator say, hey, thanks, Karen, for bringing that up. I now want to turn it to Riley to say this. They're not trying to be rude. They're not trying to cut you off. You just only have 30 minutes as a group and they want to move on to the next thing. So there's a couple of things here. I always say, on the tension thing, if somebody says something to you and you're like, it feels tense, just repeat back to them what they just said. So you said that we don't need complete streets in our district because nobody bikes or walks. Just saying that out loud makes them feel like they were heard. And it gives you that extra 30 seconds to think about what you're going to respond with. And then you can say, well, respectfully, I disagree, because everyone here in this room wants to bike and walk more in our community, and we need to feel safe in order to do that. So that's some of the ways to get through that. Like I said, the staff's job is to make sure you have a good time. So it's pretty rare. So, and then I have a couple of slides. I have some couple of slides coming up on specific situations. As the meeting gets to the end, make sure to say thank you. This is, you ask for their email. The state coordinator should have the email. This was more important for when we had virtual meetings. Ask them when to follow up. So again, saying, so can we follow up in a week? and find out if the member of Congress is interested in co-sponsoring these bills. And then if there were any questions that they asked you that you didn't know the answer to, repeat those questions, let them know you'll get the answers to them. And just offer to provide any other information they want. It's very likely they're going to ask you a question you don't know the answer to. Happens all the time. Just tell them, you know what, I'm not sure, but I'll get back to you. And then make sure you let me know what that question is, and I can help you find the answer. This was a great photo where the dog popped up, got in the middle. A post meeting, one of the really great things about the summit this year is, in my opinion, is that the Hill meeting is in the middle. It's the Wednesday. So Wednesday night, Thursday, I think it's super helpful for your team to debrief. You know, talk about whatever, make sure you're all on the same page on what happened, what they were interested in, any questions they had, decide who's going to send a thank you note and who's going to fill out the lobby report. I also tell groups that it's really worth, now that you've made this connection with the staffer, it's really worth following up with them maybe once a month, maybe every 2 months, if you're part of a club or an organization, maybe adding them to your e-news list. You don't want to overwhelm them, so it doesn't have to be everyone in your group, but maybe decide who's going to be that person, because it just makes them, you know, keeps you or refreshes them about who you are. So the next time a bill about biking comes up, they'll be like, oh, I wonder what the people in the district think. Who are those people that came to the summit? Super helpful. Okay, a couple of things. This is a state meeting, so we have those signs that have your state name on it, and this is people prepping for the next day Hill meeting. So there's a lot of roles. This leads to the way that we talked about the meeting before, like but the key thing to know is who's the meeting leader. So who's going to act as moderator and timekeeper. And then there may only be 2 of you in a meeting. There may be 3 of you, so that you don't have to do all this division. But if you're going into a Senate office and you're from Pennsylvania, we always get a lot of people from Pennsylvania. The state coordinator might give everybody a different role so that everybody has a chance to speak and be part of it. Here's some of those scenarios that I talked about. One of the things we ask the state coordinators to do is be prepared to, with the timekeeping, to do some transitioning. So you might hear something like, thanks, Karen. Thanks for sharing your experience with safe infrastructure, improving your commute. I'd now like to ask Riley to introduce our legislative ask. They're not trying to be rude. They're just trying to make sure we have time to get through the whole meeting. If you hit a dead end or get frustrated, we talked about just repeating the last thing you said. The other questions I find super helpful, which puts the onus back on the staffer, is to ask them, like, who else in the community would you be interested in hearing from on this issue? Or is there any data or information that could help you on this issue? They're 2 very basic questions, but it throws the ball back in their court. A couple more scenarios. Sometimes, especially if you ask one of those questions, there might be 20 to 30 seconds of silence. That's good. It means they're thinking. Let it play out. It's always tempting to jump in, but I say let it play out. You'll get more. We talked about if you get stumped, don't worry. Just tell them you don't know. You can follow up. They don't expect you to know the end of every bill. They expect you to know the broad strokes and why you think it would benefit your community. So if you can answer those 2 questions, that's super helpful. I also say if someone's being quiet, I ask the state coordinators to try to get you involved in the meeting. So just to let you know, if you're quiet, that's something that might be coming. There are a couple roles if there's people in the group that don't want to say anything. I really hope you do, but if you don't, one is being the note taker. Some of the things we ask you to pay attention to is who's in the meeting, the staffer's name, their email if you have it, who's on our coming with you on our side. What are some of the comments or questions that they have about the bill? I ask this percent of time talking because it gives me a sense of how receptive they were. The more they're interested in asking questions and having a conversation, the better a meeting it is. You know, what were some of the questions you asked? How did they answer? Did they give any statements of support? Like, oh, this sounds really good. But I do need to talk with my boss about it. And any follow-up tasks, like what were the questions they asked you didn't have answers to? When are you going to follow up? Is anyone, like, one of the things you can do in the follow-up is invite the member of Congress or the staffer to go on a bike ride next time they're in the district. But thinking about how you're going to do that. Okay, so your responsibilities, we've talked about a lot of that. Do your research. We have a webinar on the Congressional Asks next week, March 12th. Watch that. Can't make it in person. We'll have a video available for you. You know, attend the prep meetings as much as you can, read the handouts and materials, arrive early for the meeting, dress appropriately. People on the Hill will be wearing business suits. So we ask that you also dress up and participate. And finally, stay engaged. If you remember at the beginning, I talked about the whole purpose of lobbying is really to build that relationship. And to do that, it can't be a once a year thing. So support your state and local group, look for action alerts, share with your friends, tweet or write an e-news of your experience. And if you do that, if you get an e-news article or a letter to the editor or anything like that, send it to the staffer. That will make them remember you. So please do that and talk with your group about how you're going to follow up and keep them engaged in the work in your district. And remember, as members of Congress, yes, they're very, you know, they're focused on federal issues, but they also really want to know what's going on in their district. So last week, Black Girls Do Bike was on Good Morning America, and I sent that clip of it was the founder, Monica. She's from Pittsburgh, so I sent that clip to her congressional office and to her senators. You know, and I got a lot of, oh, thanks for sharing this. Like, they want to know that stuff. A couple of tips. Again, ask questions. I always try to go into a meeting with a couple of questions, even if I'm not sure I'm going to use them. If you're flustered, repeat the line, their last line, some basic things like, I'm not sure I understand. Could you expand on that? Can I get back to you on that? Be flexible. I mean, you want to be conscious of time, but know that you're in a group, be flexible for that. And then, of course, listen to the transitions so you have time for everything. So this is my email and phone number. If you have any questions, Riley is setting up the meetings and working with the state coordinators. And follow up on that. And then next week, I think, let me see. Yep. We have a little bit of information on the asks. We're going to do the same Langenkamp bill as we did last year. This time we're going to have it in the Senate for the first time. And this is about making it easier to use safety dollars to build safety projects. And the ask will be to co-sponsor. We're going to have a Complete Streets Act under the bipartisan infrastructure law. There's a set aside for planning money that has to be spent on complete streets. This bill would make a set aside for funding to build those types of projects, those complete streets projects. And then we're working on a bill. I'm not sure if we're going to get it introduced in time, but we're working on a bill that would make it easier to spend highway safety grants on in-school bike education. Would require an USDOT, National Highway Traffic Safety Administration. They have a curriculum, but it's like 20 years old. So we want to get that updated. We want to get it disseminated to states and to schools. And then we want them to have to report back to Congress on what they did. So more on those next week. And again, the questions. So now I'm going to stop sharing and go to the chat. Let me open the chat. Okay.